Our next presenter is Dan LaHart from our Operations Department to discuss community use agreements. Here's Dan.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm just the messenger. Many of you may recall, I think it was probably 3 years ago, I stood here and said, we're going to redo the community use manual, policy, regulation, because everything was in the regulation. And it was very difficult to change anything, but we've managed to do that. So what I want to do is walk you through. I heard the question, where do we find it? Let me give the update before we start. It's on the web, and I'm going to show you how to find that. It's 99.5% complete. It's the manual. Everything was put in the manual because it's easier to change the manual as we go through this. Once this gets out and you all say, well, wait a minute, this isn't working, and if we hear enough, whatever, we can always change a manual as opposed to changing a regulation and policy. So much like Jessica said, it's very difficult changing those policies. That just went last month, got its third and final reading for the change for the community use agreement, and now it is, separate and on the board policy, and I'll just go through where to find that. So, with no further ado, let's come back to what we had in the beginning. We can find it here. Same as Jessica had, what I want to do is show you the policy itself is under support, community use. Should have written it down myself. Or is it community use? Hold on a minute. Hope I can find it. Community use, there we go. So the regulation, it used to be 502, it's now KC, and the community use. And what I wanted to make you all understand, because a lot of times you call and say, we want these people out of our buildings. These people, they're your neighbors, come on. They're the people that live in your neighborhoods that send their kids and they use your schools. But bottom line of this whole deal is, and I know many of you call basically my front person, Chris Fuller, and she'll tell you directly, you can't deny them access. Okay, there's a process, and we'll go through that process after I go through the manual here a little bit. But bottom line is it's state law. State law says schools will develop a community association. Basically, the taxpayers built these buildings, and therefore they shall be used by the taxpayer for their community use. So with that in mind, that's the front I want to leave here as we keep going here is we work every possible means within the manual guidance now and this policy to make sure that we are cooperatively working with the community use folks that want to use our buildings. Typically it's through rec and parks, but there are some child care centers and then nonprofits that like to use our buildings. So let me go through it a little bit here, but that is the policy. It was just updated. It was last updated here just March 18th, the board meeting, March 18th, it was adopted, and it was all changed. When we come back into the regulation, it's a lot shorter than what it was. That thing used to go on for almost 15, 20 pages. Now it's just page 1 of 2. If you remember, most of everything in here used to be what was almost the manual used to be in the board, in the policy itself, in the regulation rather. So there's the policy and regulation, but to actually get to where we're going, I wanted to get you back to the home page of Anne Arundel County Schools. If I can figure out that one. There we go. We're going to come down to the employee internet. I hope I didn't lock myself out. Departments, facilities, operations. I got you. Community use of schools. And here it is as of March 15. What we attempted to do was, if you remember the old, it said, okay, here's school use, and then it went through 5 pages of explanations on school use of the school, of their own building. In other words, athletics or whatever, and scheduling and who does everything. What we tried to do was make this comprehensive enough that but streamlined and much more user-friendly, if it was. So the policy statement and conditions is here. I'm not going to go through the whole thing here, but classification of use, general standards, special standards, applications, fees, and approval process, hours of operations and cancellation policies, indemnification insurance is in here, who's responsible for what, meaning the operations staff and the user group staff, safety security, new this year, crowd management. Bob's here, Bob Yasik. That's a new law. That was law, correct, Bob? Fire department regulation then, I'm sorry. Fire department regulation. New, you'll find use of the school instructional supplies. There's always been a question about this. Equipment, furnishing, kitchen use, okay? A principal's checklist, high-risk activities, and crowd management certification. I can tell you as of yesterday, this manual will change before next school year, all right? I'm not gonna go into that quite yet. But anyhow, so basically this references back to the policy statement, the conditions of use. The superintendent designee reserves the right to establish or enforce policy special procedures. One of the things that you might have recognized recently was the use, basically in here it always says schools may not be used for private parties, private functions, weddings, et cetera, retirement parties. And of course, it was in the news there that North County had a funeral. That was a special exception given by the superintendent. So again, it's a manual for use for general conditions. Everything the superintendent, these are his buildings. In the future, his or hers buildings. But the idea there is that special exceptions may be granted at any time. But that's where that goes. Okay, so in order, user groups, school-related groups, the Department of Rec and Parks, child care, county and city agencies, higher education, that's the other colleges, this community college, state and private colleges, community group associations, the religious groups, private instruction, athletic training and sports camps, nonprofits, and here's new, the profit-making groups. They're limited only to those school facilities where there's a direct benefit to Anne Arundel County school students, or for when they are supporting a nonprofit activity such as athletic programs, fundraising for charitable purposes, employee support activities, and the community at large. All right, that's a big change, a big change. One that you're going to be calling me off the hook on. Well, they've been here forever. Again, this is what has been agreed upon. This is the manual. It's been through Riva Road and the higher ups. They all agreed on this. This, this for-profit has been, a stick for many of you. Geez, they come in here, they pay $300 and they make $30,000. I mean, what are we getting out of this? I mean, there's venues out there in the public that they could rent, and that's where this isn't a community use. This was they're using us to make a profit, And so we were looking at that as, well, where are we coming off on this? Why are we doing this? I mean, there are venues out there. You can rent halls, you can rent, hotel rooms, et cetera, et cetera. So it's one of the issues here that is going to be new for each of you to have to, explain to possibly user groups who have used you for years and say, if there's not a direct relationship, in other words, I forget the name of the company, they come in and sell rings. Okay, yeah, they're doing a for-profit here, but let's face it, it's for the school. The school gets a cut, usually, of each one of those rings. The photo groups that come in and take the pictures, that's a for-profit, but the school gets a benefit, etc. So that is the difference here. If the school, if a profit agency is just coming in and says, I want to rent your auditorium and give me the fee, and then they're using it and they charge $100 a ticket and come in and leave, and all we did was got a rental fee out of that, there was no direct benefit to the school, the kids, or the community at large, that's no longer, okay? Then other groups may be eligible to use the school facilities. Contact the principal or guidance. So there's the standard conditions. A lot of that is not changed. It's just rather than looking from page to page as it used to be, again, regular school hours, cannot be used for parties, celebrations, weddings, showers, et cetera, private in nature. Can't exceed the fire marshal. So anything that's regular, by regulation, law, or code, obviously they can't, disrespect those laws, et cetera. Again, this picks up the cigarettes, vapor pens, et cetera, that never was in there before. No overnights unless it's going to be an approved school function. I know some of the Relay for Life go 24 hours. You're at the school for 24 hours, but it really isn't, we're sleeping inside the school type of thing, okay? So that kind of deal is what we're talking about. Unless the superintendent agrees. Cannot be used for dances unless they're school affiliated, so you can't have a mosh company come in. Animal shows, training, obedience, unless they are part of the educational purposes here. High-risk activities, that's always been in there, but now it spells it out as to where they are. Commercial organizations who promote profit-making ventures for the specific gain of an individual or individuals is prohibited. And then the school use has to have, if you're going to use food, application permit. Insurance is here. These are, like I said, the general conditions. Decorations must be non-flammable. You must leave the area in a satisfactory condition. Malfunction, we try to make every effort to, correct the situation, but, they're renting the buildings as is, where is. If the air conditioner breaks on a Sunday afternoon and there's 300 people in an auditorium, if we don't have the capability or a person doesn't respond to a call to go in there, you rented it as is basically what it amounts to. No subsidiary business or service concession can be operated for profit on school property. I know that we've had some vendor trucks outside and et cetera. These are the restricted areas that is spelled out that you cannot rent, can't let them use, et cetera. Standard procedures for religious groups, that typically goes back through the business manager, through the business department at Riva Road, up through the superintendent, colleges, private instruction, athletic sports camps, grounds and outdoor facilities. It just spells out pretty much everything that you need under that one paragraph as opposed to flipping pages that it used to be. What we did is we put the links, they all should work. Felicia checked them all out up in our department and she said they all work. So there's your application form is right there. Application for religious groups is here. Application for the exemption after 5 years is right here. The commercial bit rate is clicked right in here. And again, that will change. Usually we change that every 6 months. So it's not in the manual as it used to be. It'll be on the web. General provisions typically says, the school principal would like some time, the user group should give you guys 3 weeks to get through the application process. Everything goes to the finance office as far as all fees. They do not come to operations anymore. All fees go to the finance office. Any other user group should be directed to Rec and Parks for sponsorship. Again, everyone that comes under Rec and Parks gets a sponsorship. That means they've been vetted out. They have their insurance, they have trained personnel, they've gone through a security clearance, et cetera. There's the hours of operations that typically is right there, that we allow the buildings to be used up to 10 p.m. on school days, 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. non-school weekends. Recreation and Park, if they're gonna cancel for the weather on a Saturday, here's the number or their website that people need to call. If they call you and say, how do I know? You canceled school on Friday, but what about if the school's gonna be open on Saturday? Well, we may not have them cleared yet. We may clear them Friday night, and therefore you could open them up on Saturday morning. So, Rec and Parks deals with my office, the maintenance division, to get an idea on how well the schools have been cleared, and therefore can they hold their activities. Sometimes we cancel Saturday, but we're ready to go by Sunday. So again, all that information is on the county's website, not on the school website, or by calling the number. Again, school facilities prohibited on holidays. There's the insurance clause of what each person must present. Hold harmless, us. In other words, the school system is held harmless. If they're renting our facility and someone gets hurt, it's on them, unless it's really, that's an attorney, lawyer question there. But I mean, if we're negligent in a way, that's one thing. Here's the responsibilities of the custodial staff. This is where the change will be coming. I'm not going to address that right now. We're still working that out with Rec and Parks. Saturday, Sunday, holiday school staff, what their duties and responsibilities are, what the responsibilities of the user group is. Life safety codes, et cetera, et cetera. Safety and security. You know, during the school day, these schools are locked down tight and everyone comes into the office and gets checked out. But, you know, one of the issues has always been, come 3, 4 o'clock, schools are wide open. And this is where we and Bob and I and others have really tried to figure out what to do. That's what the change is coming. We expect to have it in place by next school year. But basically, we're looking at identification of a person who's in charge of that user group, so people know, do they have a cell phone that they could call for an emergency, et cetera, that kind of thing. Crowd management, this is what Bob and I alluded to earlier. This is a fire code that is just in. Basically, if you expect 50 or more persons, you must have one trained crowd management person on staff. Must be there in attendance. If it's over 250, then you must have an additional person. Okay, so you take an auditorium that's seating 400, somebody must have 2 people there or so for crowd management training. And all that is an online training. They sign up, take the online training course, and then they present a certificate that says, yeah, I took the online crowd management training course. So that's one of the different changes in here. Okay, this has always been the big boy, one of the other big boys. School instructional supplies, equipment. Instructional equipment and supplies may not be used, lent, traded, encumbered, consumed under any circumstances by a user group. Okay? Without permission of the school principal, use of non-instructional stage and lighting equipment. This equipment requires additional fees. So if you're going to have sound equipment, lighting equipment, pretty much you got to work that out with the user group that you need to bring in a knowledgeable person from your staff who agrees to work that day, and then they get charged the hourly rate of that person, or time and a half of that person. So that's kind of where that is on that question there. That's always been out here. Bleachers, et cetera, can be used, but you can't, change the bleachers. You can't move them back and forth. We don't want people moving them in and out. So you can't adjust the bleacher sections. Cannot make changes to our electrical panels, and you cannot use the wireless networks. Kitchen use, if anyone wants to cook, you must have a permit from the health department and from our own food service people. And so if you're preparing food, if they're serving food, one way or the other, it's against the health laws of the state that they must be prepared by a licensed, certified individual who has overseen the preparation of that food, which is why, the bake sales have been, supposed to be suspended from the schools and bringing in the food to feed to the kids in the classrooms. No one knows who prepared that food, under what conditions they were prepared, et cetera. And therefore, that was all supposed to have been shut down. I mean, it's a sad world, but that's what we live in. So just for the health and safety of the users of the building here. Here's an appendix, one of the appendix, a principal's checklist that, okay, did I do this? Do I have the application? Is it an eligible use? Is there quite the type they want requested? Is that on the approved list? Will there be adequate custodial coverage? The custodial coverage does not have to come from your school. Under the Unit 3 negotiated agreement, all Unit 3 employees are eligible to receive overtime, okay, to apply and say, hey, I wouldn't mind working this weekend. So if your school folks say, no, we got no one that wants to work this weekend, so you go back to the user group and say, well, we don't have custodial coverage, so you can't be here. Doesn't work that way. You need to contact your area manager, who will then, put the word out. And once we go through the schools in the neighboring feeder school system, then we can go outside the feeder school system, and we can even go as far as other operations Unit 3 employees. We've had our pest management people cover functions in the past here, as well as garage personnel and maintenance personnel, okay? So, you just gotta recognize that you cannot deny the use of the school based on you don't have custodial coverage at your school. Think system-wide, I've got 762 custodial function people out here. So, yeah, we can get someone who wants to work. Somebody wants the OT, okay? So you cannot deny it because of custodial. Now, the principal and I can determine if one custodian is enough, 2 or 3. There have been functions here where we've had 3 custodians split the day, so that one's not there from 6 a.m. to 11:30 at night. Okay, we can do that. We can have overlap when it comes time to cleanup time. Okay, we want to bring a person in for 4 hours at the end to help, clean up, or we want 4 hours at the beginning to help set up, whatever that is. As long as it's a sponsored organization, Rec and Parks is paid for that. If it's an outside group not going through Rec and Parks, then we put that into the fee. Okay, you're paying 4 hours for this one person, 8 hours for this person, and then 4 hours to bring that other person back. Something like that, okay? So all that can be worked out. High-risk activities, that's the whole paragraph there. This comes out of risk management, but pretty much they're telling you what you cannot do. Roller skating, rollerblading, snowboarding, tobogganing, pool parties, ice skating. Things that don't need a special request are sending field trips out here to these associated organizations. Prohibited activities. Someone comes in and says, we want to put bull riding up in our carnival here. No, can't do that. Sorry. Okay, so any of these car washes used to be held in the schools, but no more. Hot air balloons, you got it. Okay, helicopter rides. Can't have that.
I like the donkey basketball. That's what
Crowd management training right here. Here's how you get your training certificate for crowd management.
Now, Dan, how long are those for, those certificates? How long is it?
That's once, Bob. The certificate for crowd management, that's just once, right?
One time, keep them on file in the school
And
office.
it's good forever?
Good forever.
Awesome.
Okay, that is the update to the community use manual. I hope it's going to be a little bit user-friendly. My next goal, this was 3 years to get this goal done, is to get this to our design and print shop and make it even more user-friendly, so it's more like a manual, not just reading paragraph after paragraph. And that's what they're good at. They can take that and maybe make a half a section here, and over here you'll see the highlighted word, term, or something like that that might say, fees, and there it all is, or where to get to. That's what I'm hoping. But we'll play with that one as we go through the year. Once that gets done, it'll be re-put back onto the web. But for right now, this is up and running. It was approved March this year, And that's your marching document, I guess, for right now. The fees go right now through June the 30th. We'll be relooking at the fees for rental of facilities and energy, again, for the July 1 through December 31st. We pretty much do them every 6 months, and they go right on the web also. Is there any questions? Yes?
I have a strange circumstance, but we have an agreement with the Board of Ed that our parking lot will be used by Board of Ed offices, and I now have a church wanting to use our school on Sunday. I told them there was no problem with the school usage, but I told them I don't know about the standard of the parking lot being used because it's outsourced through departments of the board on weekends. Is that something I can tell them, or should I have not said that?
School use is trump, okay? Anything that is for the schools trumps all other users.
Okay, so then
So they have to work around us. If we're parked vehicles in our own lot, then they have to work around us.
okay, so then they could use the building but park elsewhere.
Yeah.
So just wanted to make sure I was.
Where's that at? Naplesell? Okay, I got you. Yep, I got it.
The crowd management piece, do you see custodians being certified, particularly for like record park events?
I see that coming. Shh. Right now, the custodian is not responsible for the activity inside the school. Okay, that is up to the user group. And they're supposed to have, much like on the field use, and you'll hear later on this afternoon, a monitor. Each activity coming into your school is supposed to have that person in charge. They're the ones that should be the one who knows, the crowd management. Again, it starts at 50. Over 250, it just means you need to have 2 people that have been through that training. That's all, and have their certificate, which they would present then on their application, So that's a good question to ask. Well, how many people do you anticipate? When they come in to ask you, we want to use your school this Saturday. How many people do you anticipate being here? Well, we don't know. Well, okay, let's take a look. You think less than 250? Yes, okay, then one person has to be there who's had that certificate, Yep.
I have a question in reference to,
Suggest all applications for religious groups go to the supervisor of finance. Chris Bopanad is his name, down at Riva Road. He would be the person that I would suggest that you start with. He has the listing.
name one more time, I'm sorry.
Yeah, thanks. Bopanad. B-A-P-P-A-A-N-A-D. Okay? Really nice guy. He has the listing of all religious users in every single school and what they're paying or when their contract's up, et cetera, et cetera. And he would be the person then that I would hope, be able to help you there.